Hello, everyone. My name is Monique Jones. I'm the president and CEO of Forefront, and I am here with my fabulous senior management team who will introduce themselves individually, but I wanted to give you a heads up. This is a conversation about equitable leadership, a forefront conversation to advance racial equity. And why we're having it now is because we said we would give you an inside look at how Forefront goes through the journey of racial equity, doing some internal work while also doing some external work to really assess what the sector needs right now. This is the second conversation we've had or we're having that we will share with the masses to understand how we're doing the work internally. But it was important to me as the leader of the organization to share with you the thoughts of the senior management team. No doubt they're really big thoughts, but we'll put it into context in a real conversation as we're 8 months, 9 months into my tenure here and thinking about strategic planning and what that looks like moving forward to be the organization that the sector needs right now. To start, we have conversations that behind the scenes can get pretty intense, mixed with learning and knowledge building and sharing and giving each other grace. And so we've come to our own discussions, we've come to our own definitions about what leadership looks like, what equitable leadership looks like. And I want to share with you my definition of equitable leadership. And then each of us are going to talk and converse and actually share our questions with each other as we move along this journey. Now, I've been in this work for some years, I won't say how many, and as a leader for a good amount of those years. And what I have discovered is that leadership is how you define it. It is your personal definition. It is how you decide to show up every day. It's what you decide to bring to work with you and what you allow to come home with you at the end of the day. For me, it's oftentimes showing up in a room as the only person of color, sometimes the only woman, sometimes the youngest person in there, or sometimes a little bit more senior. But equitably, it is being able to be at a table and share my content and context expertise in a space that may not have experienced before. And so I continue to lean into that equitable leadership in the spaces that I work, love, and live. And with this team, I love the fact that they also are able to share their equitable leadership in different ways throughout the sector where they work, love, and live. Strategically moving forward, Forefront will be sure that we are bringing our full selves to the office and we are engaging with the sector in a way that invites them to bring themselves into the office. So I'm going to start a round of questions. Actually, I'm just going to start one question. And our team will introduce themselves as they ask questions, but I'm excited to introduce to you this team at this moment. And my first question goes to our CFO, Derek Stovall-Leonard. Derek, I would love for you to tell us what leadership means to you right now.
Leadership to me is really the art of my phone ringing in the background.
That is very real, so real.
It's the art of getting a group of people rallied around one goal. It is understanding where the mission of the organization and really moving that group of people around, moving that organization to a different point. One of the things that I read a lot, even though it may not show sometimes, is Proverbs. And there is a proverb that says, be diligent to know your flock and attend to your herds. And so I apply that as I work on a daily basis in trying to be diligent in knowing my people and the people in the organization. Not all of us come from the same background. Not all of us experience the world in the same way. And it is my job as a leader to be diligent in understanding where each of them come from, what are their needs, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, so that I can rally around them to bring their best selves to forefront.
Now, I know that about you to be true just because of how I've gotten to know you over the past few years, but where in your career did that show up for you, that you knew that that's what you needed to do?
I've had several mentors around in my life, some of them professional, some of them personal, that have allowed me to show up as my authentic self, as well as those that have taught me in some environments where it has not always been as welcome, and how to navigate those waters as well. And so from that standpoint, I've always tried to at least be a sounding board for people within the organization and or my staff to help them to also understand how to best navigate those things.
That's very important. Thank you. Do you want to ask the next question, or do I have to pass it off to who wants to go next? I feel like this is a firing squad. Who's going to go next? But I know everyone had a favorite question they wanted to ask, and that was mine. But I just want to share. I want the other two staff members to respond. Who would like to go first?
Lisa, do you want to start? Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, no, I can jump in. I have, because
Cool.
I love this question. Leadership is something that I've been intentionally learning about a lot and trying to practice for years now. And I think the definition that I keep coming back to and that I really hold is that it is an activity. It's not a position, and that it is the practice of mobilizing people to make progress on challenges that are really tough and to thrive while they're doing it. And that last part, I think, speaks to what you were just talking about, Derek. That I so appreciated hearing that. That just that the leadership is really the activity of helping people thrive while we get stuff done. It's not about the win or the loss. It's about the how are we making progress? How are we caring for each other as we go down this path, whatever that is.
Well, Lisa, I have a question for you. With all that said, it hit me late last week that you are Forefront's senior staff member in terms of tenure, and with that level of historical knowledge, as we talk about, I jumped into the question. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Yusuf Garcia, Chief External Affairs Officer for Forefront. And Lisa, given your time, how have you seen the leadership landscape evolve within Forefront's walls?
Yeah, thanks. And I realize I didn't introduce myself either. I'm Lisa May Simpson. I'm the Chief Program Officer. And yeah, I started here as the Member Services Manager 9 years ago. And I'm grateful to have been able to evolve, hopefully along with the organization, and have definitely seen some shifts over that time, notably in terms of the person at the helm. But I think, so, there are those big things. There's the fact that when I started, nonprofits weren't full members. We had a different name of the organization. There are those very visible sorts of changes. And I think a lot of you may be familiar if you're watching this. You may have seen some of those and experienced them in various ways. But I think from an internal perspective, the shifts that I'm still seeing are that we are getting clearer a day at a time about who we are and what we're here to do, and how we want to do it. I think that's been an active question for as long as I've been here, and we've tossed around a lot of ideas, and folks certainly have lots of thoughts about how we should be showing up in the world. And so, taking all of that in and really sort of starting to distill it into the vision that I'm really, I'm excited to be a part of, helping to mobilize folks around, is where I think that's where the shift is that we're getting clearer about what is ours, and what maybe is not, and also where we can partner more effectively to help make change, because I think that's really our sweet spot.
There's a second part to that I want to add on. Sorry, Yusuf, I've hijacked your question, but so with all those changes, what do you think the sector is expecting of Forefront? Anybody?
Well, so I mean, I'll jump in, and then I want to make space for my colleagues, and for you, Monique, because you've been talking to folks and you have really like fresh, direct feedback about what people are expecting. But I think, I think folks are looking to us to be that leader in the way that I described earlier, that they're looking to us to mobilize the sector to help make progress on some of the things that we have all been working on in one form or another for a really long time. And I think we're really starting to identify that at the core of that is making progress on racial equity. That's what sits at the center of so many of these big sticky problems that we're all working on pieces of. And I think folks are starting to look to us to help mobilize them to make some progress there.
I would love to offer a yes and a little bit of a deeper, from my perspective, what our sector is expecting from us. And Lisa, you mentioned what we're really, really good at is convening and mobilizing and all of those good things. And I've been seeing out and about that folks are looking for us to be transparent, to lead by an example, like we are the case study, and also to lead with more vulnerability, because as we're a legacy brand of almost 50 years, people have seen many iterations of our organization, some good, some not so good, et cetera. And I've been hearing a lot of folks want us to lead with that transparency, to not be afraid of the past, but really to learn from it, highlight it, pick it apart, and also show that folks can have these conversations and discourse while feeling uncomfortable and still have an end result that's extremely valuable.
I appreciate that, Yusuf, and I'll say, Derek has heard me. Derek and I have had more conversations about the financial sustainability of Forefront than anyone else in this group. And when I come to Derek and talk about it, his bottom line is, now how do we pay the bills with that? Not so, blunt, but essentially.
Sometimes.
That's where he goes to. And so I struggle. So to your point, Lisa, I struggle with all the existential questions that I have about what racial equity means to the sector. And at the same time, well, what does Forefront do with that? How do we build anything with that? Is there something to sell, in that package? And what I've come to realize, and I'm wondering what you all think about this, is that if we are not up to par, so to speak, with implementing racial equity into our day-to-day work, we will be obsolete. We will be non-existent. Derek, is there a business model in there that?
Well, no, I agree with that. And since we are being transparent, that's one of the reasons why sometimes I do struggle with the connotation of racial equity, because I think it should really be woven into our day-to-day work. If we're talking about, or if we want to use an analogy like a consumer brand, let's just say, take Coke, for example. They market actively to minority communities because minority communities consume the product. They are oftentimes more brand loyal than some other majority communities. And so it is just good business to engage in that. And so when we talk about racial equity, especially when we sometimes, and we don't do it often, but when it is taken out of the context of the normal course of business, it raises the hairs on the back of my neck a little bit, because it is a partial to what it is that we should be fundamentally doing every day if we have a sustainable business model.
And I love that, Derek, because that's sort of the missing piece. I was having a conversation similar to this with my husband about how his organization is investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but not at the fundamental business level. Like at every stage, every workflow, every business unit, it hasn't quite gotten ingrained at that level yet. And what I'm finding in partnership with you, Derek, Lisa, from a programmatic perspective, Monique from the CEO and board perspective, is we're checking off all of those boxes intentionally to ensure that our racial equity work, I'm doing this like it's rooted in all of the systems that are running our business.
It is. I've had the pleasure and the privilege to come at racial equity from two different perspectives. And it's one coming in and sort of applying it like a blanket on top of processes that are already moving. And I love the process that I'm doing now, which is coming in and having everyone in the organization and who governs the organization engaged in it in some way so that it is a piece of, it's a thread in what we do. And to an earlier point that you asked, Lisa, that's what I've been hearing. So if you all, we know who our membership is, and I'm speaking to the membership now, it's a group of people all trying to figure out where it lives in their organization, where it lives between their organizations, and where they are coming together and where there is discrepancies in how we live this world. And so people are looking for Forefront to help figure it out. And so occasionally in talking to some of our colleagues, I've deemed myself the Olivia Pope of the sector right now, because there have been times when people will come to me like, what do I do with this? And I'm like, oh, as a therapist, I'm going to charge you $1 to give you, this advice. But as a leader in the sector, we all have to be transparent in talking about it openly. So I love that. I want people to see Forefront trying to figure it out. But this conversation is because we're still trying to very much figure it out. Mm-hmm.
Monique, you said something earlier that Monique, it was either you, Monique, or Lisa. I think Lisa actually, that we're figuring this out one day at a time. One thing that I'm hearing, sort of a theme, is that we've had a lot of successes and wins in this work, and that hasn't really been the case. So I want to sort of paint the right picture for our members and the folks who are out there experiencing this conversation. And maybe a final question to the group: what have been some of the challenges that we've all been facing that just sort of really highlight the gravity of the systems change work? And I'll ask Monique to take that. I know that was not a planned question. But I'm curious from everyone's perspectives, what are some big challenges that have really weighted this work?
You know what? I think the challenges are self-made. You know how you have a technical difficulty and you say it's operator error. I have traditionally had a difficulty with what people expect me to do versus what I'm going to do. And so sometimes that comes along with hiring me and seeing a resume that I've done this work in the past and thinking I can come in and answer all the questions, with me sitting back saying, I'm not going to do that. We're going to figure it out together. Even if I think I know the answer, coming in and telling you what it is not the key to this work. Because again, I've done it, and then that lets people off the hook. So the difficult part for me is letting folks figure out the messiness without coming in and telling them what I think should happen. And so to that end, I've seen folks want to rush through it and get to the end. They want to know what's going to happen from A to Z. And there's no way I can tell you from A to Z, but asking the community to trust that no matter how A to Z looks, we will get to Z together. And you just have to trust the process. So as a leader, the difficulty for me is there's human capital here. There are all of us that have salaries that families to take care of, while the organization and the sector is going through this not so clear, transparent space, and we are not an ambiguous, loving sector. We want to know the answer now. So that's always been my challenge, seeing us go through this and not know what Z looks like.
I'd say for me, the biggest challenge is braiding the threads. And what I mean by that is, we mentioned this about in our last conversation, where Forefront has created a truly accessible advancing racial equity committee that engages with key members of staff. So it's bridging governance and management of the organization. And to what I've found the most challenging is understanding that everyone is bringing a different lived experience, context expertise, and content expertise. And that slows down production. And I'm coming to terms with that's okay. That is a sacrifice that we have to take on in order to make sure that the Z getting to Z is right. And having to support different perspectives as a leader while having to get stuff done. It's both the most fulfilling and cringing element, because my role is to bring in revenue. I'm reporting right to Derek, and Derek's like, where's the money? but we're dealing with complex personalities. Where's the money? So that's been the most challenging aspect for me, is balancing the organization, but also supporting the needs of our people who are also, struggling.
Yeah, I think I'd just add on to that a little bit and say that you both have mentioned, the people and the pacing. And I think in addition to what you've just described, a big part of the challenge for me has been kind of being humble enough as an organization to get the pacing right. A lot of what we've talked about is like, we got to have our stuff together enough internally before we start trying to talk to anybody else about how they might want to take their own steps down this path. And from a programmatic standpoint, we've been sitting here for a couple of years, honestly, with people saying, when are you going to do a program about this? We need a program about this. We need resources. We need. And I hear it and I feel it. And there are so many great resources out there that I'm so glad we can send people to, but it also, like, you were talking about like feeling cringy. You said like, I feel cringy when all we can do is say like, go over there. And again, there are so many content experts and so many people who have so much beautiful expertise to share with folks. So it's a privilege to get to direct people out to them. But to just constantly check myself and say, you know what, we're not there yet. We shouldn't pretend to be an expert in something that we are just not. And so just like checking the pacing over and over and over again. It makes me anxious, but also like grateful that we're not getting out ahead of ourselves when we should.
Yeah, I can feel that anxiety. You guys are like the best team to reflect with, because you give me the really optimistic and the really down to earth, and the way we have to pay the bills today, but if we don't do this, we won't be able to pay the bills tomorrow. And we know there are opportunities all over the place. So it's a real privilege. I know that we are short on time. And so, although we could talk about this forever, so maybe a part two, but I want to bring us home to a final question. And it's because we've been doing this internal work. We've talked about the internal and the external. So I want the community to know that we did some internal healing work, some internal truth, racial healing work. And part of that is figuring out what your own personal history adds to this conversation, this linear discussion of how we do something externally. And so I believe, I know we're all college graduates. I know where we all grew up. I know our backgrounds, but did you think, or as my aunt said, who'd have thunk it? Did you think you would have been working at a place like Forefront in the 21st century after a global pandemic talking about what do we do now with racial equity? And I will answer this question for myself and I'll say, hell no. I thought I was going to be saving little, babies. I thought that I was going to be a therapist working in foster care until I saved the world, because that's what I wanted to do as a social worker. I'm very happy that I'm here with everyone, but this is not by any snap of what I thought I would be doing right now. What about you, Derek?
I can't say that this is what I thought that I would be doing. I thought that I would be working with an organization. I am extremely happy because most of my career has been spent in corporate. And so it was very, very bottom line driven. I am very happy to be with a organization that is much more mission focused. I am really embracing the work that we're doing with fiscal sponsorship, because that allows me to really work with organizations from a very grassroots level and to make sure that they have the undergirding behind them to continue to do their work. So I am very happy with where my career has matured.
I didn't think it was possible. From my background and where I'm from, I just didn't think it was possible. I didn't think that Latinos could be at this level of leadership in any organization, let alone Forefront. And it wasn't until my time at United Way when I actually saw folks like Jose Rico and others really being able to lead and be brown. So no, I didn't think it was possible. Did I think I would be doing it? No, because I didn't think it was possible. But now that I am here, Derek, I give so much love and propers to the mentors, both personal and professional, who said, "No, fool, you can do this," and now I'm here.
I love that so much. Yeah, I didn't know this was a thing. That didn't, that this is a career path had never really occurred to me until I looked down and I was walking on it. But I think, like I can look back now and I can make the connections between my very first nonprofit job, where I thought I was going to save the world in a very different way, Monique. I was working in a women's health clinic. I was, like providing direct service. And that's where I first saw burnout happen. And, the start of this path that I'm walking now was watching one of my coworkers walk away saying, "I'm done, I'm out of here," and literally never seeing her again, and thinking, I got to get out of here before that happens to me. Because that was the only that was the only outcome that I could see at that point was, okay, you do this really important work until you go up in flames. And then who knows what happens. So no, I didn't think I would be doing this in particular, but I'm so grateful to be able to hopefully contribute to some changes where that happens to fewer people.
That's a good point. We do have a lot of colleagues who are burned out, who show up to work every day to solve problems that are unsolvable. And so I take it very personal when that happens, especially to good leaders who have so much to bring, not enough assets, not enough resources to answer the call, step into their calling, so to speak. And so I am hopeful that Forefront can do that. And it reminds me of over the weekend, a major news anchor retired. He had an on-air panic attack, which caused him to seek meditation and founded his own meditation company. He's taking a role tour right now to advertise that. So businesses grow out of people possibly going up in flames and burnout. And so it is very real. So with all that said, what you see is just 4 people who represent an organization of other staff members who also have these conversations behind the scene, wondering what their backgrounds, their personal histories, their professional career trajectories can do. And one of the things I always ask anyone I hire or anyone who works with me is, what do you want to do after Forefront? And I've asked that of this team, and I know what they all want to do after Forefront. So we know that we are not here indefinitely. We are here but for a moment. And we have a calling, if you will, while we are here. And so what you see is a part of a conversation that will continue behind the scenes. And I want you to understand that we are here to have these conversations openly, to do the work openly, and to slip up and mess up and get it right. So we will be sharing this. We want you to stay in touch with us, of course, via our newsletter that comes out weekly. So please go to our website, which is myforefront.org, to sign up for that newsletter. If you are not a member, absolutely become a member so that you can get in on the inside of these conversations and join us in other ways. I look forward to hearing your feedback. So of course, when this airs, you always have the opportunity to send us information, send us ideas, send us your concerns. So let us know what you think, and invite us to join you at your conversations, at your tables, because that is absolutely where we want to be. Derek, Lisa, Yusuf, thank you. You all are the greatest A team I've worked with, and I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate you sharing this with me and with everybody. Have a great